Okay, so today we are reacting to my Strava race PRs. All of my PRs and different distances on Strava, I'm going to go through and break down what those races looked like from the 5K all the way to the marathon. So let's get right into it. Starting with the 5K, the title of this run was 16:59 unofficial. I didn't even write 5K in the title, but it was on a track and it happened in 2021 in April. This was actually a few months after my very first 5K on the track. So like I ran a 5K on the track and ran 17:03 on my first track 5K, and then a few months later came back and ran this PR, which was a 16:59, which is just about I think it's like a 5:18 minute mile. Strava has it a little bit slower than that because the distance is actually a little longer, or like the GPS recorded it a little differently. But on the track, it was exactly 3.1 miles. And it was kind of a rainy day, I remember. I didn't really know what I had in the tank that day, but the thing was, I just remember like not really sleeping the night before. But I will say that the week leading up to this race, I did a workout on Tuesday, and this race was on a Sunday. I did a 5 by 1K repeat workout with a 2 minute rest at exactly this pace. And so I basically determined that when I do a 5 by 1K workout the week of a 5K race, I can run the pace that I do those 1Ks at during the workout for the actual race. So that was like something that I like learned. And I've used that for athletes that I coach too, where I'll say, okay, go do a 5 by 1K workout at your goal race pace the week of the race. And then on race day, you can probably do that. So that was something that I learned at this race. And I was really pleased with myself, even though I think my goal going into this was actually like a 16:45. But I was happy to break 17 and have that be my 5K PR. So let's go to the next one, the 10K. So this was also on a track. And I set my 10K PR in May of 2021. And this was actually a few months after dropping out of a race for a 10K on the track, which was actually a race in Austin, of all places. And so I dropped out of that race in February. And then I came back a few months later in May and ran 34:37, which is just around a 5:30 minute mile pace. And I was very, very pleased with this. Running a 34:37 meant that I was well under the 35 minute mark, which was my previous PR. And yeah, I mean, this was a magical, magical race. It was definitely a hot day, and it was at 8:30 at night on the track. But everything was in line. Like I was ready for this. I felt a lot of support. I felt very calm. And I knew what I had to do in order to run this PR. But more importantly, I just stayed relaxed for the entire race. And I think that was kind of everything, was just going into it very relaxed. And sure enough, ran the 34:37. That is still my PR to this day. And I'm always like, I always think about that night as like such a special race because I just showed up and did the thing. So moving on to the next one, my half marathon PR. This was in November of 2020. So this was during the pandemic. This was actually the first race during the pandemic that they allowed local sub-elite runners to come run this private race in Rockland Lake Park in New York. And I entered this race the same week that I had run my 5K PR. So at that time, my 5K PR was a 17:03. And so I ran that 5K on a Sunday at a local track race. And then a few days later, I heard about this half marathon, and I entered and drove out to do this Trials of Miles race. And I ran a sub 78 minute half, which was awesome. So to break 118 and run a sub 6 minute mile for a half marathon that I didn't even train for because I only entered it a few days before. I didn't even know this race existed when I stumbled upon it. That was really cool. So I will always look at that race as maybe not psyching myself out because I wasn't even aware. It wasn't a race on the calendar. It was just something that I showed up and did, and it just like proved my fitness. And I will say that every weekend leading up to this race, I was running about this pace for 10-mile tempos. So I had 5 weeks of 10-mile tempos on the weekend at about this pace. So I knew that if I could do it for a 10 miler, I could do it for a half. And like I said, that 5K was fresh in my legs. So it was nice to like use that and then just go big. But I also will say when I closed this half marathon, so I did very negative splits for this whole race. I started in the 6:14 minute mile for the first mile. And then I slowly chipped down. The first 4 miles were 6-minute miles. And then I went from 5:58 down to my last mile was a 5:37. So that's how severe negative splits there were for this race. And I just remember how exhilarating that was, just passing people at the end because I had way more in the tank. So finally, my last race PR that I will share with you guys reacting today is the Chicago Marathon last fall. And the crazy thing about this race was that I was training for a sub 240. That was the goal. Anything between 240, 237, that was what I was training for. That's what my paces were in training. But things were not perfect the day of the race. Obviously, I fell very hard at the race start. It was ready, set, go. I was flat on my face on the concrete. And then I got myself up, managed to just keep going, ran 26.2 miles on a bloody leg. And I managed to hold very, very steady splits for this race. My first mile was a 6:32. But then my second mile was a 5:58. And then I averaged 6:15 pace for the rest of the race. So that really goes to show how you never really know what you're going to do. If like your first 2 miles are that different from 6:30 to 5:58, I didn't know what was going to happen. And I remember even at the halfway mark of the Chicago Marathon, thinking that I was going to have to drop out and just not knowing what was going to happen. You even see a 6:25 minute mile at my 8-mile minute mark, a couple 6:20s in there, but then I closed really strong. And it's amazing to see that like all that hard work paid off. Even though I didn't hit my goal of being sub 240, I was able to just like hang on and have an average of a 6:15 minute mile pace for an entire marathon. So those are my top 4 running race PRs, and I hope you enjoyed this breakdown. Please subscribe to my channel for more running related content like this, and you can find me on Instagram. I'm at Lucie Beatrix, LucieBeatrix. Until next time, just be fast, just win.